Welcome to the Fifth Element Lens. My name is Dean Hager, and today we're talking about what we should have learned in high school about liberatory theory. I was in a group meeting of very intelligent people the other day, and I mentioned that nobody is being taught liberatory practice, and the meeting went kind of dead because nobody knew what I was talking about. And I realized right then that I really needed to do more of a deep dive for Fifth Element for listeners like you who may not understand what I'm talking about. So if we went back in time and if high school had actually prepared us for the real world, we would have learned liberatory theory a long time ago, long before we ever learned how to diagram a sentence or balance a chemical equation. Or like do algebra. We would have learned how power works, how systems shape our choices, and how to recognize when harm is being normalized. We may have been actually taught how to think critically about the world that we're inheriting instead of being trained to stay small and obedient and live quietly inside the systems that were created around us. So, if you think about it, it's everything around us that has taught us to conform. There's quite a bit of information on this. I could go and do an extended podcast on just the history of how the education system is made to help us learn to conform as adults in a lot of ways. But I'm not going there. I'm just going to stay high level today. Liberatory theory is not really an abstract thing. It's actually the study of how people free themselves from systems that limit their agency, their ability to make their own darn decisions, their personal dignity, so that they are empowered as a human being in their ability to thrive. It's the work of understanding how all of these kinds of structures, whether they be political, economic, or cultural, are shaping our lives actively, and how those structures can be redesigned. Now, if you want people to stay under your thumb, you do not want them to learn how to redesign systems. That is subversive thinking. And that subversive thinking is, that moment, if you've ever felt like something about the world didn't make sense, or it didn't feel fair, or you're living inside the matrix. Shout out to my Gen X friends who know what I'm talking about. Or it didn't, just whatever's happening didn't match what you know about human worth. Then you've already brushed up against liberatory theory. You weren't given the language for it yet so that you could know, oh, this is what other people are talking about too. So we are talking a common language, which is powerful. What we should have learned in high school is that systems are built by people, and anything built by people can be changed by people. And we really should have learned that. Inequality is not an accident. It is engineered into our systems. And because it's engineered, it can be dismantled. And we should have learned that neutrality is a myth. Every institution has a worldview that is baked into it. And every policy had a set of winners and a set of losers. It would have been ideal. We maybe wouldn't be sitting where we're at as a country in my home country of the USA right now. We should have learned to ask these questions. Who benefits? Who pays the cost? And who gets left out of the conversation? And In our individualistic society in the USA, we really did not learn that, you know, finding our agency, finding liberation is actually collective. That means community, not individual. No one gets free alone. All flourishing is mutual. So did Robin Wall Kimmerer say in Braiding Sweetgrass. The conditions that limit one group eventually limit all of us, because systems of domination are always interconnected. Racism, classism, ableism, patriarchy, extractive capitalism, those are not separate problems. They're interconnected that reinforce each other. And the work of liberation is understanding those connections so we can interrupt them. And if we'd actually learned liberatory theory early, we would have been taught to see how power works more clearly, and we would have learned to recognize when a rule is actually a personal preference, or when a norm is actually a strategy, or when a neutral policy is actually a medicine, like a mechanism of control. It's not that neutral after all. And we would have learned that compliance is not the same as safety, and that silence is definitely not consent. and we would have learned that, harm is not something that needs to be inevitable or baked into our processes. And instead, we could possibly build repair into our processes. That's the foundation of Fifth Element's framework right there. Fifth Element is built on the belief that liberation is not just some theory that we've, heard academics talk about, or, famous, brilliant people who are thinking about how to make people feel less oppressed. It's a design principle in Fifth Element. So it's a way of building the systems and the businesses and the relationships we need that refuse extraction and instead choose a way of being accountable to each other. And accountability, if the world had more accountability. And, it's also a way of seeing the world that asks, what conditions allow people to thrive? And what would it look like to build those kinds of conditions on purpose? What would happen if we put a group of people together who all committed to doing this? I bet you they'd become friends pretty fast. Fifth Element is meant to teach you to look at any system, a workplace, a business model, a policy, a relationship, anything, and ask, here's some 5 questions distilled in those 5 elements. What is the material reality? How does it move? What ignites it? What stories hold it together? And what coherence does it create? So that's earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Those questions are reframed by me, but that comes from liberatory theory. They help you see the architecture of power, not just the surface. They also help you evaluate a variety of things that we'll use it for, self and business. They help you understand why things feel the way they feel and why certain patterns repeat. They help you design systems that don't reproduce harm by default. So if I can only imagine, if high school actually taught us liberatory theory, we would have entered adulthood with a different kind of world literacy, really. We would have been able to read the systems and We would have also learned that our discomfort is information we can use. That's real data. And to use our intuition, because it is intelligence. And that our desire for justice is not naive. It's a sign that we're paying attention. There's always been, if you're not mad, you're not paying attention signs. Over my life, I've seen those from various people's bumpers, stickers. And while it is a time to be angry all the time, there's always a great reason to be mad. I invite you to be curious, strategic, and thoughtful. Now is the time to be very curious, strategic, and thoughtful. And that is the fifth element way of doing things. Not fast, not impulsive, not knee-jerk, and not mad. It's a sign you're paying attention. And it's also a sign that you're in control. There's a part of me every day that finds something and wants to say, burn it down. Burn it down. Oh my gosh. I've heard that so many times in my life. I've known activists and wonderful people that care passionately about our country. And they would yell, burn it down. Because they know what it is. It's a system that needs to be dismantled. That's what that means. And we could take it literally and think it's arson, but that's not what's going on here. We know we can dismantle the systems because the people behind it can be stopped. This episode is your primer. It's the foundation you should have been given years ago. And it's really a starting point for understanding what fifth element is here to do. It's to give you the tools to see clearly, to design intentionally with strategy, and build systems that honor human dignity instead of eroding it. This is not about activism. This is about making your business aligned from the start. Liberatory theory is not just an academic subject. It's a survival skill. And it's time that we all learned it. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to visit my website and learn more about what we're doing here at Fifth Element. We have workshops, retreats, group coaching, group hypnotherapy, and more. Drop by sometime. Would love to hear from you. Have a great day.